Okay, today is March 6th. We have a regular meeting this evening. Roll call, Denise.
Chair Elrod,
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Rudnicki, Commissioner Bolt,
Here.
Commissioner Corbett,
Present.
Commissioner Graham,
Here.
Commissioner Kruger,
Here.
Commissioner Miles, Commissioner Samuelson, Commissioner Stallman.
Here.
Jocelyn, should Bruce come on up here, or are we expecting RC or Kurt?
We're not sure at the moment, so.
Okay, so we'll continue as is, and if needed, we could either raise a hand for the vote or something else. Okay. Okay, so on the agenda for tonight, we have the minutes for the October 24th regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the certification of the October 24th meeting minutes?
I move to certify the minutes from October 24th, 2016.
Thank you, Brian. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Lynn. Okay, we'll go ahead and vote.
All right, the vote's unanimous and the motion passes. Carries.
Thank you. We're a little out of practice. It's been a while. Okay, the next portion of the meeting is open to public comment on general business or just making sure it's not on anything that's on the agenda for tonight. So anything other than for what's on the agenda tonight? Any comment from the public? No. Okay, then moving on to general business, we have a resolution for preliminary plat located at 5000 South Prince Street. And Andrea, right on cue.
Madam Chair, Council's recently changed it, the public comment procedure, where it's both public comment for general business and non-agenda. So we'd ask at this time if there's any non-agenda or general business.
That's what I did ask for, and no one raised their hand.
Okay, we only heard one of the two, but
I'm sorry?
we only had one of the two items that
Oh,
was.
oh, right. Oh, so that's what you're saying?
Right.
So we don't have one at the end of the meeting anymore?
Correct.
Good to know. I'll ask it again. Any public comment for general business, which would include what we will be talking about now, or non-agenda items? Okay, but there's nothing out there? Okay, so then we'll start with staff presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Andrea Mimnall of the planning staff and Planning Commission. Tonight I will be making a presentation on the Plat 56 development plan. The Plat 56 has a number of different planning steps that need to be approved before construction can actually begin on the site. And so up here is the list of those planning projects. You may remember last fall, the Planning Commission looked at the General Plan Development Plan. That was an amendment, and the zoning in that application was set for the Plat 56 project. The next is the preliminary plat. That's what you're going to be looking at tonight, which sets property boundaries and utility design. Final plat is what follows. That's approved by City Council. And then finally, there's a site development plan, which includes all the details, and that is administrative review. The location of Plat 56 is near the intersection of Bellevue Avenue and South Prince Street. You can see it on the screen here. It is located more specifically just north of the Walgreens Pharmacy and along the west bank of the Platte River. This is a snapshot taken from the preliminary plan, and it was also included in your packet. And here what you can see is there are 56 private lots. This is how they would be laid out. And in and around those 56 lots is what's known as Tract A. Tract A includes driveway area, sidewalks, parking area, and some landscape areas to be used for things like water quality and a dog park. I've included the open space exhibit here to give you a better feel for what this site plan looks like. Here you can see the Tract A and how that lays out. And also just wanted to touch on a little bit on the open space here. And the GPDP set a requirement for the project to have a minimum of 25% open space, unobstructed open space. And what the applicant is proposing now with the plat is that that will be split between Tract A and also being provided on private lots, which is allowed per the PD regulations in the zoning code. So within Tract A, and you can see Tract A is the gray area and also the kind of the lighter green, almost fluorescent area. The fluorescent area there is approximately 29,000 square feet. And then you can also see some darker green areas that sit right around the building envelopes there. And the total of that darker green space on the private area comes to approximately 8,600 feet. So when you add it up together, it represents 29% of the overall 2.99 acre site. So thus it meets the requirement for the minimum of 25% open space. In terms of the analysis, the staff took a look at how the project meets the criteria, and there are 5 of them. The first one is compliance with provisions of the subdivision regulations, and the plat meets this provision of the subdivision code in that it was prepared by a registered surveyor and includes all the required information requested by the city. Number 2 is that subdivisions must be in compliance with any approved plans. In this case, I mentioned earlier, there's a Riverside PD plan in place for this property, and staff found that the various provisions that are applicable to a plat, in fact, were met with this. The 25% open space minimum has been met, and also the density has been met. The plan allows for a little over 18 dwelling units per acre, and in fact, this is coming in right at that maximum amount. The third is compliance with the comprehensive plan. And this was already established with the Riverside PD plan and has been addressed at that time. And so the staff finds that with the council approval that the comprehensive plan compliance is met. Number 4 is compliance with existing and proposed development. And the staff finds that the proposed preliminary plat is within the Riverside PD plan, which represents a unified site design for all elements of the development. And then 5, the last one, is that the city takes into consideration comments from affected agencies. The city did, in fact, receive comments from agencies, and none of them expressed concerns with the project. And so the staff finds that the preliminary plat for the Plat 56 development conforms to the requirements of the city's subdivision regulations, and staff recommends approval of the preliminary plat. There is a copy of the resolution in your packet, and it is set up for approval. You also see in your staff report that there are other sample motions in the event that the commission would like to postpone or deny the application.
Thank you, Andrea. Any
Excuse me, I'm sorry, not deny, but postpone.
Any questions for Andrea? Ryan?
Two. So applicant is not asking for any exceptions. This is just a normal part of the preliminary plat process. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And in the unobstructed open space exhibit, it is common for paved areas, including sidewalks and driveways, and private spaces to be considered part of the unobstructed open space?
So the unobstructed open space is defined in the zoning code, and it can include areas that are not drived upon or do not have structures on them. And so that leaves areas for sidewalk.
Okay.
And so that's a paved area that can be counted. And it also includes area for vegetation, and it can also include ground level patios. And that, in fact, is the case with this application. I have another exhibit here. And what this shows, this was in your packet as well, and what this shows is how the units are laid out to give you a better feel for where the open space on the private lots is located. And so you can see they are listed here as patios, and they are in a kind of a pinkish brown color. They are ground level, and they are open to the sky. And we find that meets, because they have no structure on them, that meets the definition.
So even if they're paved and impervious, that still counts as long as you can't drive on it?
So long as you can't drive on it, and we also require that it's at ground level, yes.
Ground level, okay. So I guess I was confused the first time you presented the thing. I thought that the driveways and parking areas were counted in the 29%, but they are not.
Yeah, I apologize for that. So within Tract A, which will be owned by a homeowners association, you have a couple of different categories. You have the drive area and the parking area. You also have the green space area and sidewalk area.
Which are part of Tract A?
Part of Tract A. So the open space, the unobstructed open space, is located primarily within that Tract A, which is controlled by the HOA, and then additional open space is provided on the individual lots.
Okay. And then there's a creation of a lot line. Is there any issue with that, separating the two properties that the current owner owns?
Yes, so let me go back to that. You can probably see it best in this exhibit. So it doesn't show the existing lot line, but the situation is that the property owner to the north also owns this property. And the parking lot on that site to the north is built out currently as it's shown on this exhibit. But the property line is jagged and doesn't correspond with how the parking lot is built out. And so in an effort to make the best use of space and clean up the line, the property line is proposed to be straightened out as you see here. And so if you noticed on the cover sheet of the staff report, there were two different acreages shown for this site. And the first one represents the property in its current configuration.
I see.
And following, should the plat be approved and gets recorded, then the 2.99 acres is the final area for this site.
Great. And then that results in the 18.7 units per acre? Is
Yes,
that right?
that's correct.
At the 2.99?
At the 2.99, correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Bruce?
I had a couple. I think you just probably answered one. There's a statement in here that talks about final configuration after land swap, which is a specific concept. can you refresh my memory as to what's being swapped? Just, they're giving parcels to clean up the lot line that you just described?
Yes, that's right, along the north property line. The current configuration looks something like this. It's jagged,
So the developer's just,
straightening it out.
all right, okay. So that's, I understand that part of it. Couple other questions. We had, when we approved this in September, there was an amendment that talked about the access portals to the decks being 52 feet specifically. Is that an item, that's an item that I'm assuming doesn't really affect the plat layout per se, it's more a design element almost kind of item, but so there's no representation in here of that amendment, only because it doesn't have anything really to do with the plat, even though we approved it for the PD.
Yes, that's exactly right. So the PD plan includes the zoning for the property.
Right.
And the height is one piece of that zoning. But in the configuration of establishing property lines and utility design and easements, the height doesn't come into play. Now, the next step, should the platting be approved, would be the site development plan. And at that point, when staff revisit administratively, the height would be reviewed.
Okay, all right. The other question I wanted to ask about was, in code section 11-5-1, which is the subdivision, it refers to plat details vis-a-vis subdivision plats. You guys are familiar with it. It talks about plat requirements, I guess subsection B or 5-1B6. Talks about existing and proposed contours, width, direction, flow of all water courses in any area and any area inundated by the 100-year frequency flood. And then part of what needs to be provided ultimately, and maybe this is the question, is some sort of a drainage way plan and some sort of collateral in the form of irrevocable letter of credit. Are these all items for the final plat that don't really come into play for the preliminary plat? Is that why we're not really seeing a lot of that?
Yes, although the city does require a preliminary drainage plan with the preliminary plat.
Is that in here?
It is not in your packet because it's not at this point approved. And before we bring the preliminary plat to you, see, it's not really required to be approved. We have a final drainage plan that needs to be approved by city council. The preliminary is not a document that receives approval, and so thus we don't bring it to the board for approval. But we've reached a point where the engineers have determined that from what they've seen so far, that the drainage is feasible. It meets the standards, and with further details, they anticipate that the final drainage plan can meet the city's requirements, and that will be looked at by the city council.
Okay, and that's sort of standard procedure that planning commission doesn't really need to see that kind of thing because it's sort of in process a lot of times?
Yes, that's a good way. It's in process, and the other piece of it is it really takes an engineer to.
Is what?
It takes an engineer to interpret it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly bring it forward if the board feels that they need it in the form that it is currently, but it is not an approved document at the current time.
Well, hypothetically, if we were, does that sort of imply that we should then theoretically approve this subject to that document being approved?
Well, I'll leave that to the attorney, too. The question.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, sure. The code requires a drainage plan, which isn't apparently approved yet, so we're being asked to approve a preliminary plat. And I guess my question is, rather than just approve it, since we haven't seen a drainage study or a drainage plan, does that imply that we should theoretically approve this subject to the drainage plan being approved by staff and/or council?
Sorry. The way I read the code is that the final drainage plan is approved as part of the final plat, and it's not a part of the preliminary plat approval.
Okay, so it's not something that we would normally be expected to deal with in planning commission?
That's my understanding.
Okay, all right. The last question I want to ask was, what is this? 11-5-1, sub D, sub 2 talks about evidence of unsuitable surface or subsurface soil conditions. I don't remember if this came up when we talked about the project back again in September. Has there been any, but it's clearly in a floodplain at some level. I mean, it's within literally a stone's throw of the river. Is there any soil study that needs to be done similar to the drainage plan as far as a final plat rendering approval is concerned? And again, is that something we don't deal with because it's prelim at this point?
I think that question can probably best be answered by our acting city engineer, and that's Ryan Dooley, and he's available.
Sure.
Ryan Dooley, acting city engineer. So yeah, the details of the soils, I don't have those with me at this time, but I think it is something that would come along later as part of the final plat.
Okay.
Yeah, whether or not anything is adequate.
Okay, so I guess, yeah, just in terms of these, as long as you guys are, if that's, again, normally, we don't see many subdivision plats anymore. I mean, it's been a long time since, we've had a lot of subdivision activity in the city just because it's obviously built out. So it's not something that we deal with all that frequently. So part of this is just if you guys are used to doing these and all of these are checklist items that are then going to be attended to as far as council is concerned, I don't have any major heartburn with that as long as that's what you guys are representing.
Yes, that's something that would be taken care of at another time.
Okay, all right, thanks.
There's some elevation change between the river and this project, and if I'm not mistaken, this project's actually out of the floodplain, if I'm not mistaken.
Do we have a display with the actual 100-year floodplain?
Yeah, the floodplain here in this case is confined.
You'll need to come up to the microphone, or we can hold that question until we hear from the developer. So hold that
I
question.
reviewed the maps. That's what I saw, was that the floodplain actually comes up partially on the elevation. It's contained within the channel. So it's, I'm not even sure if 500 would hit that area.
So Lynn, let's hold that question and we can ask the developer because they can represent that, at least from their perspective, if you don't have anything else to add to that.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
Yeah,
David?
I have one question. Back when we were talking about this before, there was some question about emergency vehicles being able to get around if there's enough radius. But the last time we talked about it, you just had an illustrative plan, so this presumably is more what the final structures are going to look like. So is there enough radius for emergency vehicles to get in and then get into the nooks and crannies here? Looks like a couple of really tight turns.
Yeah, the radius has been reviewed, and that is also part of, the site development plan. But at this time, we don't see any concerns from an engineering point of view that emergency vehicles could not get in and out
Okay.
per the standards.
Are there actually two exits here? This north
Yeah,
one on
the
right?
northern entrance exit is for emergency vehicles
Okay.
only.
That's what it looked like, yeah. Okay. And then just one other point. It looks like on the PDP, there was going to be a change that said requires review and approval by the developer. That was going to be changed, and it looks like it's still in here.
Yes, I can speak to that. So the PD plan, the Riverside PD plan has been approved by council, but it has not been finalized or recorded at this time. So the form that you're seeing it now is the form that it was in when it went to the city council. Before we'll move forward with the recording, we will work out all of those those few little details at the staff level.
Okay.
Anybody else? I have a couple of clarifying questions on coming back to open space. And so with the 29,000 that you represented, which was in tract one? Sorry, tract A. So that was what is considered the common areas, which would be the sidewalks and some of this lighter green shaded area. Where are the sidewalks on here? How significant are there sidewalks, and where are they?
Well,
My assumption is 90% of it is in that green of that 29,000.
I'm sorry, your assumption is?
My assumption is that there are not a significant amount of sidewalks, and so a majority of the open space truly is more green space than it is hard space.
It's possible that the applicant has a site plan with them. You can see the sidewalks a little bit on this plan. They do run along the sides of the buildings, and they are also included in those landscaped access points from the drive area down to the greenway. So I would say that most of the unobstructed green space within Tract A is going to be actual landscaped area of some sort as opposed to sidewalk.
The next page has some sidewalk illustration on it. Looks like.
Oh, the other exhibit? This
Yeah,
one,
that
yes, that's,
shows some around the edge of the building.
Oh, next to the green,
yes.
the trails.
The exhibit on the right shows the sidewalk that is of use for all residents, and the one on the left is primarily in the right-of-way as a city sidewalk.
Okay, all right. No further questions for staff? Okay, so we'll move on to the applicant, if they have a presentation. Thank you, Andrea.
Pull yours, Andrea. Can I pull your?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that one is not mine.
That's, oh, sorry, that was Mark's.
Okay.
Here we go. Great. Well, my name is Jeremy Records. I'm with Central Development, and I'm happy to be here again in front of you showing you Plat 56, the development in discussion tonight. Plat 56, I think, is going to fill a big void in Littleton right now. As the aging population of Littleton grows older and is looking for a simpler lifestyle and a more travel-based lock-and-leave lifestyle, housing demands are changing. And as their children that grew up here and went to school here are now getting older, they're also looking for a different lifestyle, and it's not the lifestyle their parents had. Right now, there are 199 homes for sale in Littleton. Only 13 of those are townhomes. And of your housing stock, only 5% of your housing stock are townhomes right now. And townhomes, they're not for everybody, but they do attract a group that, again, likes the lock and leave lifestyle, doesn't want to be bogged down by yard work and whatnot. And frankly, if you, there's a study that was out regarding millennials, and 75% of the millennials would rather have an experience than a possession. And so what they're looking to do is have a place to go, park, sleep, but then they want to be out. They want to be riding their bikes. They want to be up in the mountains. They want to be out at a restaurant, at a festival. So it's a different mentality in housing. So with that, we have Plat 56 designed around those two demographics that offer some diversity in the housing stock in Littleton. We have engaged not only with the referral agencies, but we also had a District 1 neighborhood meeting where we brought people out, showed them the project, showed them the elevations, and had no complaints and had great support. The site is very unique. It's not a typical Littleton site. It is on the buffer of Littleton. It's on the border between Sheridan Inglewood and Littleton. It's also on a border between industrial and retail and residential. And so in looking at the site, we decided that, Littleton typically is more of a country type style, and a very typical design now is contemporary farmhouse. But we felt like a ballpark style, and I'm getting ahead of myself. This is all stuff for later, but I wanted to paint the picture for you guys. We felt like a ballpark style that transitions into the Riverside Downs, which is just south of Bellevue, which has a lot of brick and a little harder scape, was a better look. And that Riverside Downs is a tremendous asset, along with the King Soopers Shopping Center, the bowling alley, the walkability of this site for someone to not have to cross a road, to be able to go underneath Bellevue and get to a coffee shop or a bar or a workout facility, to be able to cross Prince Street and get to a grocery store or a bowling alley. It's a very walkable site, which lends itself to a higher density. That being said, the density that we're proposing is less than the density of the surrounding developments. I've got an exhibit here to answer your lot line question. So this was all one owner, and the owner sold us the vacant land. And so they didn't really care where the lot line was, and the lot line really made no sense. And as this pulls up here, I'll be able to explain that a little bit more. Some of the apartments to the north, their parking was actually on the lot that we will be buying. Some, and the lot line kind of was jagged at the top instead of a nice clean lot. So what we've worked out with the group that sold us the property was an agreement to cooperate on this plat to really clean things up. And that's really all it's doing, is cleaning things up so that we don't have to give them an easement for their parking. Boy, it's taking forever, I apologize. While we're waiting for this to open up, I just wanted to hit again on the open space. I know that was asked. Again, the required PUD and the required, frankly, open space for a comparable zoning, even if it was not a PUD, is 25%. We're almost 30%, or 29%, almost 30, which is a 20% increase in premium of open space. And that's how Littleton calculates it. That's not how other municipalities calculate it. Some of the amenities that we have here with these properties are second floor balconies and then rooftop decks. A number of the units will have rooftop decks. That is very usable, functional space for rooftop gardens, for patios, for entertaining, and none of that is calculated. It's just as functional as a backyard, but it's not calculated in our open space requirement. In regards to the soils report, we are not in the 100-year floodplain. Chatfield mitigated a number of those risks. Obviously, the 60s, there was major flood, and it was a problematic site, but Chatfield took that out. And that's regarding the floodplain. So there's no flood concerns at all, no flood insurance, really no risk unless something, if we flood, other people are going to flood, and it's going to be a much bigger issue. And regarding the soils, we have done a geotech report, which tests the soils and recommends foundation types and paving types and whatnot. So that has been done. And so all those reports have been done, and they will need to be submitted as well and referred to through the building department. Regarding fire, we did talk about the secondary access to the north. So we do have that easement. It got signed today with the neighbor to the north. So not only do we have the construction easement worked out, we'll be moving a water line. We have that approved by the neighbor to the north. And then we also have the fire access easement that is approved. And in the interest of time, I know you can't see this very well. The kind of pinkish land here.
Can you put it on the white?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thing there?
If that works.
Can we have the overhead, please?
So the reddish or pinkish piece of land is land that we currently own. And as you can see, it extends over the entry to the apartment to the north. So we technically control their only means of access to their site. It also encompasses their parking on the south side of their property. And then the blue represents land that the landowner to the north currently owns, which obviously is not being used by them and encroaches into our lot. So we are giving the red or pink to the landowner to the north. The landowner to the north is giving us the blue. So it's just a cleanup issue. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mark Saval with Redland. He's handling the civil side of the project. As Andrea mentioned, we do have individual fee simple lots with the structures on them and a party wall agreement between the two units. And then we will have a Tract A, we're calling it, which will have all the common area. And we've been working with the Public Works Department here in Littleton to make sure that they have access to the utilities going forward and one point of contact. So I think we've altered what we originally intended to do to address some of the city's concerns.
Good evening. My name is Mark Saval. I'm with Redland. We're at 1500 West Canal Court in Littleton. So I'm the civil engineer on the project. And just to finalize the discussion about the floodplain of the South Platte River is about 80 to 90 feet to the east of our eastern boundary. And the water surface elevation of the 100-year flood per that floodplain, for the floodplain studies, is roughly about 8 feet below what the nearest buildings will be at the finished floor. So we are well outside the floodplain limits.
Could you please speak in the microphone, please, so we can get a clean record?
Sure.
Or tilt it up towards you.
There you go. As Jeremy said, with the utilities, there's currently an existing 24-inch interceptor sanitary sewer on the property, which will be relocated to align with the driveways that we'll be building between the units. There's also an existing 12-inch water main that runs through the site that'll also be relocated. And then there'll also be a new public sanitary sewer that'll run through the driveways that'll actually be servicing the actual units. So all the public utilities, both water, which would be Denver Water through the city, and then the sanitary sewer, which will be directly with the city, will all be running through the driveways. And those will all be on the Tract A, which is the common area. So all the public utility easements will all be contained within Tract A. So none of the private lots would have to deal with any of the public utility easements. We also have two water quality features, which would be like rain gardens that'll provide water quality for the stormwater runoff. And those ultimately will drain to the south. And there is an existing channel that runs along the south property line of the site between this site and Walgreens, which is it's kind of a substandard ditch right now. It's overgrown with trees, is not very efficient in conveying stormwater. So we're going to put that into a pipe and then be able to landscape over it while also providing a maintenance access to it so that new storm line can be maintained. So that's pretty much it for the infrastructure. We have done an analysis of the truck turning for a fire truck to maneuver around the site so that they could access the units. We're providing additional fire hydrants with a new water system so that the fire department has fire hydrants in order to protect the buildings. And then with that additional fire lane access on the north, there'll be 2 points of access for the fire trucks to access the site. Which is what they require. So I think that's it for engineering.
So moving on to landscape again and open space, and we'll bring Justin Hay with Stacklot up here to comment in more detail. But essentially, this type of product where you do have a lock and leave, you still need some of the abilities to have a barbecue outside, to entertain outside. As I mentioned, starting at the top, we have a rooftop deck, which will allow for outdoor entertaining or outdoor gardens. On the main living level, which is the second level of most of the units, there's an outdoor patio for barbecue or chairs to sit out and enjoy the outdoors. And then on the ground level, we felt that it was important to have ground level space for the unit. For example, if somebody wanted to put a a barbecue downstairs, or if they had a dog that they wanted to let out in the winter, but they didn't want to have to go outside, there's an area that would allow for people with pets to just open the door and let their pets go out in their yard in a controlled environment. So those are the private spaces that the unit owners will be allowed to use, but then we also have some public spaces to enjoy as well, and I'll have Justin come up and explain those. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Justin Hay with Stack Lot, as mentioned, the landscape architect on the project, 5639 South Curtis, Littleton 80120. So I think just to dovetail on what Jeremy was mentioning, just from a landscape perspective, I heard kind of the path systems and connections, and I don't know what graphic we're working on here. It looks like we've got a technical difficulty here, but so all the units are very well connected. We have concrete paths throughout the site that connect each unit, and there's a loop system that moves you throughout the site here. Let me see if I can maybe just open up a plan here. Yeah, right. Let's see here. Maybe that just even that's not it, is it? So let me just keep talking. So essentially, we looked at it where when you approach the project site, so the frontage along Prince Street, there are, as Jeremy mentioned, a frontage of patios, and each patio is kind of your own kind of private entry. So there's a 36-foot high fence system around each patio, and it's really a small swing gate that brings you into each property. So there's a front door that brings you through a patio that then brings you through your front door. And the idea of each of these, here's a good example here, a graphic actually that faces towards the riverfront along Platte. So we wanted to have some private areas. As mentioned, these are townhomes. So we have our public areas and areas where we want interaction, but we also want, these small, more intimate spaces that are off on the ground level, open to the air, but also can have maybe small, 2 foot to 3 foot wide planting areas that are consolidated to each patio deck. And then also mentioned earlier on the overall open space, these patios extend into the building, about a 60 square foot area that's covered as well. So that's another kind of piece that's not included as part of the unobstructed open space number, that 29%, because it just goes back to the lifestyle of kind of minimal maintenance. Thanks, Jeremy, I appreciate that. Minimal maintenance and really kind of conducive to a mobility lifestyle where you're living in your unit and you have kind of exterior spaces that deal with the interior program, but you also recreate quite a bit, jump on the trail or are heading up into the mountains. And that's kind of the way that the landscape here and the intimacy around each building responds to the user, really. The public spaces, to pick up where Jeremy left off, we have kind of 3 main public space areas. One of them is shown in this graphic here. We do want to have a dog park that's in the northwest corner, and this area is just a simple area that's not going to provide issue with dogs doing their business everywhere on site, where you can actually have a little bit of a mixer area with the community. And then we also have an area that's going to be a fire pit area that's adjacent to the riverfront location. And then we also have intermittent seating in this area here. This is the fire pit location. And then right here, this is kind of where we have a small seating and congregating area. The rain garden that was mentioned here is going to be a turf area, and it's going to be surrounded by kind of a 24-inch step wall. So it's almost like a little amphitheater seating area with turf and just very manicured. So these units aren't looking into a detention pond or what we all think of detention pond. It's a more manicured, concrete edge, refined rain garden area that you can move in and out of it. And the rain garden is only a couple of feet deep. And so the soils are well drained. They're sandy soils that can accommodate various planting types and turf selections that we're going to be putting in there. And then, as I was trying to mention earlier here, the Prince Street edge is a little bit more of an urban feel from a landscape perspective and stoop level. And then the Riverside edge is a little bit more of a blended edge with how we did some of the tree plantings and a little bit more selection with a more native plant palette that accommodates the more native edge to the east of the property. Yeah, I think that's kind of the quick overview of the landscape. If you guys have any questions regarding specifics, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for the applicant?
I guess just to finish up, I'd like to just point out both the civil and the landscape mentioned their address. The other team member is Woodley Architects, who's also Littleton. So the design team is 100% Littleton based. So they have Littleton's best interests in mind.
Thank you. We like to keep it local. Bruce?
Quick question, I guess, maybe for the civil engineer, or maybe you can answer it. Again, sort of going back to the code, if it basically says if you don't need a drainage plan, which you guys are saying you don't need because it's not in the floodplain, which is okay. Apparently, then you have to provide some sort of a grading plan. And I guess my question is this thing pretty much graded out flat, or is it going to slope toward the river? Do you guys have a plan that you're going to, again, include in a final plat that sort of describes what the topography will ultimately look like?
Yeah, the actual document in the preliminary plat does include a drawing that shows the existing grades. I think at one point we did have proposed grades on there, but I think we were asked to clean that up just for appearance so that it was more readable to see the utilities and the easements in the open space. But as part of the preliminary plat, we did submit a concept drainage plan, which had proposed grades, existing grades, as well as all the drainage structures, the rain gardens, and the outlets for the rain gardens, and how that was the stormwater was being conveyed ultimately to the plat. As part of the final plat and the SDP, we have submitted a final drainage plan, which goes into extreme detail of how the rain gardens were sized, making sure all the pipes that we're installing have capacity to convey the 100-year storm event.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? Brian, nothing from you? I have a question for Justin. Thanks. Coming back to the rain garden area that you, on the north side, is that an area that is actually accessible by everyone there, or are you not allowed to access that?
You can access it from the north. So this location here is essentially at grade. So there's a path that loops around like this, and you can access directly without any stairs, just going straight into the rain garden area from the north. And then the walls surround kind of the west, south, and east. They kind of cup a U around it, and they're terrace walls. They're just 24-inch maximum high walls that we're going to terrace down into there.
So for those units that are around that space, that space is really more for aesthetics. They get to enjoy this somewhat open space or green space, although given that there is some access, kids could run down there and kick a ball around.
Correct.
If there were kids,
it's going to be turf. And then just like all the units have, these are going to have their private patios along the edges. And then, yes, this is accessible to the community here.
Okay. And then on the southern end, there's a big piece of open space down there, which is also a detention area. Can you talk a little bit about that and also its accessibility and
Yes.
amenity to the community?
Yeah, I would like it to be more accessible, but this, unfortunately, from a stormwater standpoint, don't want to mix public into this area. We have a taller wall, and Mark maybe can speak to that. We're over, the 32-inch minimum height for putting in a fence and handrail. So that's kind of more serving as stormwater to the south versus what we have to the north.
And is that also going to be primarily turf or?
No, I think we'll have an edge around it, an edger of the manicured turf. And then when we go down into the detention, we'll have a native that's maintained, less manicured than the other areas. So it'll be a native grass that we'll have in those areas.
Okay. And as far as determining where the open space, some of this green area went, how did you go about that process? Was it address what is required because of drainage, et cetera, and then fill in based on the amenities you wanted to provide? Can you just talk a little bit about the placement of the different spaces?
Yeah, I think it came, originally from the core of the user and who was going to be on this site and the nature of the context of this area, which is very industrial and kind of more geared toward a more dense lifestyle. So it started there, and obviously that was worked out with the architect, with Woodley, and how the spaces, the intimate spaces I discussed with you was going to kind of interact with the green areas. So knowing that we were going to be tight in these areas, we knew that attention to detail as we're getting into the SDP, and I wish we had the final SDP up here to show you guys, which we, have been moving forward on. We're really refined in our materials that we're selecting around the buildings for the patios, precast pavers and, the fencing areas that I talked about that are very scaled to the pedestrian. So to answer your question, it did come from kind of a dense lifestyle that was more intimate, and that's how the open space was dealt.
Yeah, and I'd go one step further. In the land planning process with this site, we have two incredible amenities here. You have the river and the trail system to the east, and you have incredible mountain views. Even though there's a bunch of retail to the west, our elevation is actually higher than the retail to the west. And so you can see the mountains from ground level. So when you get up on the second or third level or rooftop deck level, it's going to be incredible mountain views. And so we looked at the building placement and the unit placements to maximize everybody's exposure to those two great amenities, and everything else kind of fell in after that. But the primary objective were mountain views and river views.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else? Okay, thank you. Okay, so now any discussion? Okay, do I have a motion on the table? I'll make a motion. I move to approve PC Resolution 01-2017 concerning the Plat 56 preliminary plat. And I would need a second.
Second.
And we just want to mention that, Bruce, you can vote.
Okay.
Any discussions, comments?
Do we need public comment?
No, because it's general business.
Because it's general business and the recent council changes, there's no public comment on this.
Got it. Okay.
I guess my only comment is that I appreciate the fact that what we're getting now is what we got back in September, that there's not any significant changes. And I appreciate that because it made it easier to review the two of them together to see that what you presented originally to us and asked for approval is what you're asking for now.
Agreed. Anybody else? Okay, then I think we are ready to vote. And I guess Bruce, once I, okay, we got a thumbs up from Bruce. All right. All right, there you go.
Okay. Commissioner Stallman, your vote?
I vote aye.
Okay. All right, the vote is unanimous and the motion carries.
Thank you, thank you. moving on. We don't have anything, we don't have a public hearing, and we'll move on to any comments or reports from staff. Jocelyn?
Just a couple comments for you on schedule. So as you know, tonight's meeting was a reschedule of your regular meeting from last Monday. And so you do have another meeting next Monday. And it will be a regular meeting, we believe, and potentially amendments to the subdivision code. If you all remember last October-ish timeframe, we did a study session about subdivision code. So we're bringing forward some potential amendments to subdivision exemption, Chapter 9, but we will know for sure tomorrow.
And on that, Jocelyn, can you provide the documents again from the study session, just so we have that as some backup? I'm sure it'll be part of the packet, but just want to restate that because it's been a while.
Then you also will have a meeting on Monday, March 27th, and that meeting will be to review the amendments to the wireless telecommunication code.
Okay.
And then it looks like your first meeting in April will be the Louth Neighborhood Design Guidelines. So those are just some things coming up. Also, I hope to bring forward the schedule for a couple of the existing projects that we've been talking about and moving those forward. So stay tuned for that as well.
New projects?
I'm sorry?
Are they new projects or
continuation?
Continuation, great.
Yes, yep. And tomorrow night, council will be appointing boards and commission terms that are up. So we will know tomorrow who is appointed to planning board, and there were 3 openings. So, and interviews were last week. So that's all, unless you have any questions for staff.
Anything from anyone? No, I think we're good. Nice early meeting. Thank you. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.